Welcome to the All Out Leadership Podcast, hosted by Pastor Eric Lawson, where each episode is uniquely designed to help you live all out by bringing you practical leadership from a biblical perspective delivered in 10 minutes or less. So whether you're a business leader, serving in ministry, or simply looking to grow in your leadership, this podcast is for you. Before we dive into this week's topic, make sure to subscribe to the podcast and download the show notes at ericlawson.com/podcast. And while you're at it, feel free to share the content on social media. Now, let's join Pastor Eric for this week's conversation.
Welcome to another edition of the All Out Leadership Podcast. We are continuing in the life of David, and we saw that the third mistake that David made while he was fleeing from the enemy above was that he fled to the cave. The cave of isolation leads to despair. It leads to a loss of proper perspective. And so God sent him relationship to help him get out of the cave and get back into a healthy mental and emotional state. Now, people might be going, well, Pastor, I don't really need relationships. I'm strong. I can do this alone. I'm the Lone Ranger. I'm Batman, but I don't need a Robin. So I love the story of Muhammad Ali. He was back in his prime, and he was on an airplane, and the captain over the intercom said, "Everybody buckle up." Well, the flight attendant came by and saw that Muhammad Ali hadn't put on his seatbelt, and the flight attendant said, "Sir, I need you to buckle up." And he said this, "Superman don't need no seatbelt." Well, she replied, "Superman don't need no airplane either. Buckle up." I think that's just funny. Look, you and I aren't Superman, and we need people, and we need relationships. So do yourself a favor and allow God to bring inside of your life the right people. Now, sometimes those right people don't always look like the right people on the outset, and that's what we see here with David. So 1 Samuel chapter 22, verse 2, and I like this. "And everyone who was in distress, everyone who was in debt, everyone who was discontented, gathered to him, so he became captain over them, and there were about 400 men with him." I find that interesting. So if they were in distress, debt, or discontented, they were attracted to David, and he became their leader. Why? It's called the law of attraction. You attract what you are. What was the deal? David was in distress. David was probably in some debt, and he was very discontented in his circumstances. So here's the truth. You attract what you are. Here's just a great rule of thumb. If you look around you and you don't like the friends you have, there's nobody to blame but you, because you attracted them, because that is a reflection of where you are inside of your life. And so if you want to change your life, change your friends. If you want to change your life, change your friends. Now, you don't have to be rude. You don't have to be cruel. You don't have to be mean. Never go to somebody and go, you aren't what I want to become, so you're fired. Don't do that. That's just wrong. You just begin to slowly migrate and change your circle of friends and look for the people that you want to become like and surround yourself with as many of those as possible. But here's the truth. You can't always add into your life the people that you want to become like. So here's the other thing that David did. David became what he wanted to be to attract what he wanted to have. And so there are times if you want something you don't have, you have to become what you don't have to attract what you want. So here's what we see in David. David started out in these negative circumstances, but he grew as a leader. Really, the reason God records 2 whole books in the Bible on the life of David is for us to see the journey of growing as a leader. We see David's mistakes, we see his failures, his good, his bad, but what we see in David is he's always growing. He's always remaining as a man after God's own heart. He's continually growing as a leader. And so we see what happens is you may attract what you are, but here's another truth. You reproduce what you are. I'm going to say that again. You may attract what you are, but you can also reproduce what you are. So you right now, as a leader, you may look at your particular team and you may not have all the talent that you want. You might not be able to attract or afford all the talent that you want. But if you will grow and lift the lid as a leader, then you can help raise up others under you to become great leaders as well. So I love the end of David's life where there's a recap in 2 Samuel chapter 23, and it's entitled David's Mighty Men. And you read about how David had one chief, and he had 3 of kind of like his executive team. And then of them, there were 30 mighty men, and they went out and did all kinds of incredible exploits. And I'm going to read a passage here of this, but we got to ask the question, where did these mighty men come from? It's really simple. They were in chapter 22, verse 2, and that was they were in distress, they were in debt, they were discontented, but they were attracted to David, and they grew under the leadership of David because David was a growing leader. He invested into them. We'll get into some of these leadership principles, some of the laws of reproduction as we continue in the life of David's leadership, but I'm just setting that foundation here. I want to read 2 Samuel 23, verse 8. These are the names of David's mighty warriors. The first was, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce that name. It starts with a J. Leader of the three mightiest warriors among David's men. He once used a spear to kill 800 enemy warriors in a single battle. That dude's a stud. All right, that's like John Wick before there was John Wick. Okay, that's Leonidas. I mean, like, that's a stud. Okay, Eleazar, one who stood with David together against the Philistines when the entire Israelite army fled. He killed Philistines until his hand grew too tired to lift the sword. Abashi was the leader of the 30. He once used his spear to kill 300 enemy warriors in a single battle. Booyah, that's manly. I just grew a beard just reading that because, like, that is just way cool. Benani, a valiant warrior, did many heroic deeds, which included killed 2 champions of Moab. Another time, on a snowy day, he chased a lion down into a pit and killed it. And once, armed with only a club, he killed an Egyptian warrior who was armed with a spear. Benaniah wrenched the spear from the Egyptian's hand and killed him with it. Like, this is movie stuff here, people. They didn't start like this. They didn't start out warriors. They didn't start out as elite Navy SEALs. They started out as a bunch of sniffling, whiny, broke, discontented babies. But they were attracted to David, and they became giant killers. Why? Because David was a giant killer, because you reproduce what you are, and we'll touch on that in some future lessons.
Thank you for joining us on the All Out Leadership Podcast. We hope you gained new biblical insight that challenged you to grow in your leadership. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, we would love your help in getting the content out farther. You can help by subscribing to the podcast at ericlawson.com/podcast and telling others about it. Next week, Pastor Eric will be back with another episode. So until then, we hope you have a great week being an all-out leader.